Welcome to Slope Reliability, the show where we learn about reliability, observability, and resilience one day at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Townsend. Welcome back to Slope Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn about reliability and observability and resilience one episode at a time. Today, I am joined by David Dick. David started work as a programmer in Telstra. He's worked for a variety of large and small Australian companies. He currently works for Two Steps, and through his career, he has migrated from development through to technical pre-sales and is now the head of customer success. How are you today, David?
Not so bad, Stephen. Very excited to be here.
What's Two Steps? What's that about?
So Two Steps is a specialist in synthetic monitoring. So we do, normally synthetic monitoring is a web-based solution or web-based technology, but we do synthetic monitoring for all types of technology. So Windows applications, mainframe applications, anything that you can think of, it's just point and click. So it's very, very cool.
I know there's a lot of companies which are not traditionally tech first, which have a lot of technologies that aren't supported by a more traditional web-based or API-based. So that's interesting. There's certainly challenging things to work with, aren't they?
Yeah, I think one of the problems that we face is just the lack of awareness that we're even an option. So things like people do start of day checks. What's a start of day check? It's a synthetic test. Click here, point here. Is this system up and operating? But unless you know Two Steps exists, so just get the human being to do it. That's it.
So not surprisingly, our topic for today is synthetic monitoring, which is obviously your life.
Been doing it for a long time. Yep.
And my team has been dabbling in synthetic monitoring in the non-production context to make sure that our test environments are up and running and available, and so that we can jump on them proactively. That's been fun. But we're doing the very basic stuff using synthetic API calls.
I was talking to one of my customers recently, and they talked about synthetic monitoring from that point of view of the simple stuff, just pointing a web browser at the home page and proving that it's up. You've automatically, within a couple of minutes of work, you've tested SSL, you've tested connectivity, DNS, the web server is running, the back-end systems are running. Like, it's bang for buck. Synthetic monitoring it is interesting how much you can test with a very little effort.
Maybe before we go any further, why don't we define what is synthetic monitoring or synthetic transactions or whatever it's called?
Sounds like a plan. Lots of monitoring happens on the back end. So what I would refer to as bottom-up monitoring. So you look at log files, you look at the amount of disk usage, CPU, disk RAM, network usage, and try and build that up to an overall picture of how the applications are running. Then you've got other monitoring types that are top-down. So typically this involves either APM monitoring, where you put code in your own servers, or you have RUM type monitoring or real user monitoring, where you're looking at what your users are currently doing. Synthetic monitoring is a robot that is given a specific script to run, and it runs it over and over again. So the classic type where a synthetic monitoring check is extremely useful is if you patch a system at 2:00 in the morning and somebody does something that is not anticipated, correct, and the system remains in a broken state from 2:00 in the morning until 9:00 in the morning when everyone starts to go to work. And the robot, if you look at what your actual users are doing, there's no users, so they won't tell you what's happening. A robot will tell you, hey, look, we've lost connectivity to the application.
Yeah. It's that proactive monitoring rather than reactive, which in my world, which is non-production environments at the moment, that happens. That's so important because there's so many times of the day and night when an environment's just not being used. So if we're passively monitoring, we're just not going to pick up an issue till hours or days later. Yeah. I guess another way I've thought about it, and I might be wrong, is that it's very similar to automated. So I've got a colleague. His team is very mature in their automated testing, and what they've done is they use their automated testing and they just put alerts on it, and they're just running automated tests all the time.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a similarity there, but it's not just that. It's also that you've got to have alerts and be able to track it over time. And
correct. So I think with the automated testing stuff, what matters is the system currently up and running, or is it bad? That's it. Whereas with monitoring, you need to say, look, why did the system go down at 3 o'clock on Sunday morning? I need to understand. I know that it did. I know I'm having intermittent failures. I need to understand. I need to replicate that behavior. I need to understand it. So that's what you're looking for synthetic monitoring versus just system testing. Where system testing, is it working? Good. It's passed the test suite. Excellent. Whereas last Sunday could have been with another code base. So it's just not as important.
Synthetic monitoring being proactive, that's one of the benefits of using it. Are there other benefits of using synthetic monitoring in particular?
I think another thing that gets lost is the low touch of synthetic monitoring. So every other solution involves somehow surrendering access to your servers to another code base. I'm putting this code in amongst my production code. Was it tested with that? It was, I guess. And some of the APM solutions actually do recommend that. Your developers get trained in how to use the APM solution, and the system is built with that APM solution locked in. With synthetic monitoring, it's just another user. That's the only impact to the system. And for things like SaaS solutions, you don't have that option anymore. Synthetic monitoring is your only option unless you are an extremely trusting individual and you believe it when the vendor says, oh, yes, we have a 100% uptime. Scouts on it. So
and that's one of the big reasons we're doing synthetic monitoring is our core platform is a SaaS, somewhere between a SaaS and a PaaS product, and we can't install agents.
There's the other thing that we often see is the customer will have a Citrix or a VDI type platform where one vendor is responsible for Citrix, another vendor will be responsible for the application being run through Citrix. You're looking at exactly how is the customer supposed to know whether or not the system was up or running or not. Okay. What are you supposed to do if it's not a synthetic check?
Synthetics do have limitations. One of them, which is of course, dear to my heart, as my background in performance testing and data and statistics, is you're getting a limited sample size. So obviously the confidence that you can draw from synthetic monitoring, there's limitations. That's one thing.
I think the RUM type solutions, the real user monitor, which are tracking what your users are actually doing, I think they and synthetic monitoring need to work hand in glove. So with the RUM type solutions, you might find out that, hey, some of our users are experiencing a performance slowdown. And that could be because they're all on, the same overloaded 4G environment. Okay, or they're all coming from this particular network segment, which is overloaded. Whereas with synthetics, you'd be able to say, look, I know the robot is coming from a reliable platform. So when I upgraded my data center, I can know that tiny 100 millisecond improvement, that was the result of my upgrade. Whereas you'd never be able to do that with RUM, for example. Whereas with RUM, you can say, look, I know these users are having these types of problems, so get my support desk ready to handle, look, yes, you're coming in off this malfunctioning telecommunications provider. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that they satisfy different sections, different questions.
Yeah. By itself, synthetic monitoring is a black box monitoring approach, but in combination with other techniques, it really shines.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that synthetics does, which is quite nice, is it is a really good opening salvo in monitoring. If you have a system or a set of systems, say you've merged with another company or another government department, and you've got a section or a set of applications that you want to get some sort of monitoring over, synthetics is quick and easy, and you can get some sort of coverage which will allow you to discover what systems need further coverage. So it's that sort of the pointy end of the spear, so to speak, just saying, look, these are my applications which seem to be flaky, put more monitoring on them. Get in and instrument that first, and don't worry about these applications which seem to be doing just fine. So it's different things you can do with it.
I'm going to spring a new one on you that we haven't discussed in our pre yet, which is when you're running synthetic monitoring in production, if it's like a system of record, for example, and you're creating real custom transactions, then you can do that. You can do it in any context, but you really have to engineer for it and compensate for it. You might have to label particular records with a certain bit of metadata so they can be ignored or delete them after, whatever.
100%. I think this goes back to the previous point of just you need synthetic monitoring to work in conjunction with other things. If you're creating records in another system, remembering this robot is smashing away every 5 minutes, creating a new record 24/7. And I think to go further than that, I'm not going to discuss the exact customer that this happened for, but one of my early experiences with synthetic monitoring was we were setting up a demonstration for an e-commerce site, and we'd contacted the customer and said, look, we'd like to come out and give you this demonstration. The customer said, fine. And we said, what would be better than a demonstration involving the customer's own systems? So I set up a synthetic monitoring test, which involved adding a couple of items to the cart and going all the way through the checkout process until purchase, and then just clicking abandon purchase and moving on. And we ran that for 2 or 3 days, every 5 minutes, until we got a very angry phone call from the customer because we had discovered a bug in their checkout systems that if you went all the way through and then clicked cancel, it did release everything apart from booking the delivery truck.
Come on, that's a bug. You found a bug.
We found a bug and we completely shut down their delivery system. So I was like, oh yes. So yes, synthetic monitoring you need to have a lot of thought about what you're doing and what can be the potential outcomes from. Absolutely.
Before I ask you about the big vendors and how they support synthetics, I had another thought. Open telemetry. Yes. Seems to be this approach for more of the passive side of monitoring, the distributed tracing, capturing metrics about infrastructure and platforms and apps and logs and everything. Is there like an open source framework for synthetic monitoring, or?
There are open source tools, certainly, because the same tools that are used for testing are used for synthetic monitoring. So Selenium, for example, those types of products, but not a framework as such. So we've been looking at open telemetry to push data out in an open telemetry format. But as you say, it's not really designed for synthetics. It's designed by the APM and RUM vendors to be look, here's the data coming from the front end, here's the data coming in from the back end. Let's merge the two of them in a compatible fashion and chart it. So
if you're going to use, say, Selenium, that provides you the ability to run the synthetic, but not to do the alerting side of it.
But also the charting for it, okay? Because Selenium is just the automation, it's just the robot. So you still need a mechanism to chart it. You still need a mechanism, as you say, to alert on it. Yeah.
Do you know of any tools, like open source tools for alerting and scheduling, like Selenium synthetics, and to get to assess it and provide an outcome of it? It's failed, and I will notify someone. Or
no, I don't tend to look for that sort of stuff an awful lot, because if you look hard enough, you can find tools that will provide you some sort of synthetics, almost for free. Okay, there are downsides to that, but it's the open source stuff. No, there doesn't. I'm not aware of any. I'd be fascinated to hear of any, but it's a tricky area.
That's a question for the audience. If anyone knows of any open source collections of tools for doing something,
I'll be fascinated to hear about it. A Nagios type solution where you can just plug it into Nagios and say, hey, you got synthetics up and running.
What about the big vendors? When I think of that, I think of the Datadogs, the Dynatraces, the New Relics. What's the general support for synthetic monitoring, across the industry? Bearing
in mind, I don't have an awful lot of contact with the big vendors, apart from when you meet them at customer sites. My feeling for it is that no one takes synthetic monitoring very seriously because their background is most of the big vendors come from an APM background. So we're going to glue code into somebody else's servers. We're going to instrument the line of code, and we're going to tell you what things are happening in production, not what a robot would tell you. So the synthetic monitoring solutions from the big vendors tend to be built around a Selenium type product, where it's, here is your synthetic monitoring, and it's only for web, and you have to write a script, and you have to have programmers to do it. Some of them will give you a point and click GUI, as far as I understand it, but it's still point and click recording is not the same as what do you do when you maintain it. You have a point and click script that somebody wrote 10 months ago, and you have to come in and maintain it. How do you do that exactly? So it seems to be very much a add-on It's, yes, we do synthetics. Boom, don't care. Let me tell you about our other parts of our solution. So it's, and I think certainly from our point of view, we're looking at it from as in two steps, is looking at it from a point of view, we don't really have a competitor worldwide. We're pretty much it when it comes to synthetics as far as a dedicated focus on it. Everyone else is you mean web, do that.
Yeah, I was telling you about one of the limitations. So we at IAG, we have one of those big vendors for observability. It has a synthetic monitoring capability. Yep. But for my use case, our team wants to do quite complex multi-step business transactions to prove that all these different steps and all these integrations are functioning, and really struggle with that. It was set up more for very simple, I'm going to have one page or do one API. Not I want to do 15 API calls in a row and carry state between them.
Yeah, and I want to log in and I want to do two-factor authentication and I want to click on this mapping system. It's something there are lots of things that are very complex, even in web, where you're going, ooh, how exactly are you proposing to do that in a synthetic monitoring? Yeah. And from my non-experience with the big vendors, but it seems like the feedback we're getting from customers is they don't take synthetics seriously. It's why would you want to? Use this type of solution. Sometimes you need to.
Yeah.
Oh, does that? Would you agree with that, or from your experience?
Well, I've only worked with one of the big vendors for the last several years because that's been our strategic tool. And I would say that's true from my experience, yes. It's there and it works, and what I can do is fantastic. It's just, I think we're quite advanced users in that we want to do quite detailed things. And like I used to do performance testing, and it's kind of frustrating because I was like, well, I could build this in JMeter, no problem. But and if I could just simulate that every 10 minutes or half an hour and get a result out of it, that'd be great. But yeah.
This is another interesting thing for me, looking at what's happening in the world of monitoring. You get the big vendors will tell you, we are the vendor that can do it all. And I have yet to find a customer anywhere that, apart from just very small customers, that actually only have one monitoring tool. Everyone has a collection of monitoring tools, and you're looking at going, maybe we could just settle on a model that says we need a language to be able to similar to OpenTelemetry, to be able to move monitoring data between various systems. But given that we need a dashboard, the single somebody that's a dashboard provider to show you here are monitoring results. But if everyone just sits down and says, look, what are you actually really good at? What's your area of speciality? Rather than pretending to say, look, we do everything. And you're like, yeah, you do everything, but not as well as everybody else does. So instead of one big vendor, you just acknowledge the fact that, look, maybe you need to set down to a world where monitoring is also, yes, you've got areas of speciality, and we just need to work on a model of trying to glue these systems together.
I agree. That's a philosophy that goes well beyond observability.
Yes.
Are we going to purchase large monolithic solutions which claim to do everything, or are we going to piece together these small components which are
best of breed?
Best of breed. But then you've also got to look after all the glue that holds them together,
Correct.
Which is there's a downside to that as well.
I think that's where I look at things like the OpenTelemetry stuff and go, that's where I look at as far as we seem to be on the road to that. That would be good from that point of view. Just having a means of at least communicating between the various vendors.
Yeah. Some of the other difficult synthetic use cases we talked about. So you already mentioned Citrix, and you mentioned native Windows apps, like mainframe green screen systems. Yeah. What about dealing with things like SSO and two-factor authentication and that? Do you have to deal with those kinds of things?
For SSO, so long as we talk, so SSO can mean, as I found out, SSO can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. SSO can mean, here is my website, I sign into it. But when I go over to this website, the cookie comes across with me and I'm already signed in. You're like, okay, I guess that's SSO. You've signed into one website and that gives you access, the sort of the Google type authentication. And then you have the single sign-on, which is I've logged into my Windows desktop once. And then when I launch applications from my Windows desktop, I'm logged into them automatically. So I think if you're going to do synthetics for that type of authentication, you need to have a synthetic robot that understands Windows and can get access to the Windows desktop, because otherwise you're stuffed. So for two-factor authentication, I think the same sort of thing. We've found that using the time-based one-time password, TOTP, a Google Authenticator style algorithm. That works extremely well, and it seems to be a very cross-industry compatible standard. Whereas some vendors will try and do things that break robots. For example, the Microsoft mechanism where a couple of digits come out to your phone and you have to tap on your phone to enter it's like, that is hard for a robot to be able to complete. That's very difficult. Fortunately, though, even with Microsoft, they still give you the TOTP algorithm. So there are ways around.
Yeah, you mentioned last time we were caught up about the example of Dynamics 365 as a SaaS product, which is obviously you can't install an APM agent. It's a complex application with all kinds of difficult authentication. Yeah, it sounds like a nightmare.
This is where it comes back to when you look at synthetics as being only a web-based solution, it falls into an absolute hell of incompatible techniques, and you wind up with a code base that is impossible to read. Go to this X path, perform this action. Go to this X path, type in this digit. And the poor individual that is subjected to that after 8 months and looks at it and says, what did this script actually do? Went to this X path. Isn't that obvious? No, it is not obvious. So it's and the more complex apps like 365, yes, they're not going to get any easier to automate. But if you use a different approach, you get much better results.
We've got about 5 minutes left, and you've got some advanced topics or some interesting topics you wanted to cover. So we'll see how many we can get through. The first one, I don't quite understand. You might have to clarify this for me. You want to talk about predicting the future with synthetics.
Okay.
What do you mean by that?
So, well, one of the things that has fascinated me with some of the big vendors coming out with AI and saying that they can predict the future. Look, I'm going to predict this outage. Some outages can be predicted. Look, here is a chart of my disk space, disk usage. Yes, it's going up. And look, I can tell you the exact minute that it will fill up. Yeah, okay, that's a predictable error. My SSL certificate is going to expire. That is a very predictable error. Yep, I know that is going to predict. But then you move into the area of unpredictable solutions. Okay, your techie has walked past a router and kicked out a cable. There is no way you'll ever be able to predict that sort of stuff. All right, it's not a predictable type of scenario, and that's what I think when you look at synthetics, it gives you the ability not to predict the future because it can only detect that sort of stuff as it's happened. Mm. But so long as it's happened before your users have got in, when your users aren't there, then it can essentially stop the error from ever actually being detected by human beings. It's a mechanism of saying, look, we're constantly exercising the system and predicting, essentially, that your users are going to encounter this problem when they come in, when they try and make it available, when they try and run an end of month report.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's interesting philosophically. I think I mean, it's like it's stretching it a bit there, but like the idea that AI can predict. You gave some good examples of those are deterministic, and I still think most people who work in technology still like fundamentally believe that the systems that we build and operate and test are deterministic, but they're not.
Yeah,
they're chaos. It's just impossible to predict.
100%. I think yes, 100% agree. Like I think even more frustrating is the way they're predicting things by looking at the history of, look, this error occurs when these 3 metrics do this. Okay? That only holds so long as you haven't upgraded your code base. As soon as you patch your system, all of the assumptions that you've built in there are totally invalidated. So long as you've done anything to update any part of the system, you've invalidated all your assumptions. Yeah, that's nonsense. It's not a predictable solution.
It's so much beyond that too. Like I work for a big corporate, and you might have, for any given business function, there could be 12 different systems or apps that need to talk to each other with their own code base and version, and any one of those could change. And some of those depend on other things, like a code library gets updated or some other external SaaS service.
The underlying operating system gets upgraded. That's enough. That triggered it.
AWS does something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just one of your parts of your code makes a web call off to a SaaS solution, comes back with a result. Okay. What do you expect me to do about that? Well, that's it. But I think I can see the allure to people saying that they want to predict errors coming up. Some errors you can predict, but they've already been instrumented very, very well. I mean, people have known to keep track of disk space for a very long time. People have known to keep track of SSL certificates for a very long time. These things there will be solutions that will be organizations that still need to be reminded, but to draw an extension from that to I can predict when errors are going to occur, okay, I just haven't seen it happen, that's all.
Maybe the last topic is, and you posed a question here, and I want you to clarify for me, how can you improve the user experience without measuring it?
Yeah.
Are you saying that synthetic monitoring is a really nice, repeatable, consistent way to do that?
So yes, shortly. So I think one of the benefits of having a measuring device being outside of your system and from a stable, reliable monitoring point is that you can sit there and say, look, I'm not going to pick up everything that happens to the system because, as you say, we're not tracking what every single user does from every single point. But if you want to improve the number of errors that your system is having, if you want to improve the performance of your system, if you want to do anything to your system to improve it, you must be able to measure what you're trying to improve first. Okay. Now, if you happen to have command of all your log files and all your user data, then yes, you can absolutely measure things that way. But you're still only measuring the things that you can see on those particular components. So your log files, you're measuring the traffic after it has reached that particular server. With synthetics, you've got the option of you can really measure everything. You won't be able to assign, look, this proportion of your response time is due to this amount of time on this particular server, but you'll know the overall impact. And you'll know, so one of the other things you can do with synthetics is, trying to go too techie here, but there's an on-load event for a web browser, right? The web browser says, look, it goes out, it gets a request for, give me the homepage of Google, and it comes back with a response. And once that response has been received, the browser's on-load event fires, and the browser says, hey, look, this page took me 2 seconds to load. Now, that is what a lot of synthetic tools use, and RUM for that matter too, use to say success has been achieved. But it's not real. So typically what people do will say, yeah, I went out and got the page. That's true. It took a couple of 100 milliseconds. And then I made an AJAX request that took 20 seconds to get me the user data.
Yeah.
And according to my page load, it took a couple of 100 milliseconds and I'm done. Because there's no mechanism for being able to measure background calls that are bringing in important data. But synthetics, if you're looking at it from a point of view, I just want to wait until I see the customer invoices have arrived on the screen. Then, as I say, it's a mechanism for saying, I don't care about the technology that's being used under the hood. I care about what happens on the customer's screen or on the user's screen as it happens. All right, so as I thought of it, when you're measuring it, I'm going to use this particular framework. I'm going to use this particular GUI. I'm going to use this particular communication mechanism. And with synthetics, you get the ability to say, I don't care about any of it. What have you done to actually improve how fast this invoice takes to come up on screen?
Yeah, it is. And also, it reminded me, we were at one point using RUM quite a lot to do some reliability timings for a production quote and buy system. I think there's another event called on content rendered or something like that. And it gives you and so you're focusing on the rendering of the thing, which then implicitly tells you about all the other calls that have gone on in the background.
That's true.
So yes,
that's true.
Yeah.
Maybe the problem with all those is they're very techie solutions, and they can be fooled by, oh, hang on a minute. How many on content renders did you say there was? There's 5 now? There used to be 1. Oh, yeah, we were only looking for the first. Yeah, that's something where when you're looking at it's simply about, I just want to see, has the invoice come up? Yes or no? And I want to measure how long it took that to come up. Make all the changes you want to in the background, but unless I'm measuring it, and what am I measuring, then I'm not really sure I'm actually making improvements. I just know that I'm making changes.
We've totally run out of time, but hey, we've got one more topic which you wanted to talk about, which is monitoring SaaS with synthetics.
We have covered that to a fair degree, but yes, it's. I think SaaS products are here to stay. I think that's extremely safe to say. I think that they're getting increasingly embedded into our various systems as people are learning that users really want to do that sort of stuff. And I think it's very difficult to monitor how reliable they are unless you're actually testing them. I say it from a reliable, stable monitoring point.
I think it's the responsibility of each. If you're an organization and you depend on a SaaS service to do your business, I think it's your responsibility to validate that's up and running. Just going, I'm just going to trust in the SLA that they've signed up to, or the monitoring page of my SaaS vendor and what they say, the status page is up or down. That's, I don't know. Even if you want.
So we had a customer using Google Maps. And I was looking at going, sure, we can test Google Maps. That's okay. But why would you want to test? I mean, the problem, I have never gone to the Google Maps page and seen an error. It just has never, ever happened. So I was looking at this test and going, look, this is a pointless step. There's no point to doing this. But it actually triggered an error. And the reason was because the customer refused to update their license. Even when Google had sent their warnings to the wrong email box. Well, that's not true. I'm not blaming Google for that. The customer had nominated an email box that they did not check. And at 3:00 on a Monday afternoon, Google Maps just blanked out and said, look, a license resubscription is required. And about 2 minutes after that, the customer knew about it because the synthetic tool was saying, hey, look, I can't see the map anymore. It's weird. Sometimes we're looking at going, I didn't think that was going to be necessary, but it turns out that, SaaS systems can blow up for other reasons other than just the remote system has exploded. You might have done something wrong yourself, embarrassingly.
Thank you so much, David, for taking the time to chat about synthetics today. This is such a great topic. I can't believe I haven't done an episode on synthetic monitoring.
No one does. No one does. That's the synthetics is always just tell me more about APM, rum. But yeah, synthetics is
a podcast about reliability and observability. This is almost 100 episodes. I haven't done one yet. It's about time. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you very much. Most appreciated.
And to everyone else out there, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.
Bye.